Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. You're on Iron Radio. This is Phil Stevens. I am a strength coach, power lifter, Highland Games athlete, football coach, making my debut this morning with my son playing football, and should be fun.
This is Mike T. Nelson. I'm an associate professor at the Carrigan Institute and have the physiologic flexibility. Level 2 certification will be open September 18th through the 25th. So if you want to learn about how to be more robust, anti-fragile, and just generally harder to kill, check it out. Physiologicflexibility.com.
All right. And I am Lonnie Lowry. I'm a professor of 20 years, industry and academic consultant, former competitive bodybuilder. You know, Phil, I did coach youth soccer 2 seasons years ago. So when you say herding cats, I know what you mean.
Yes. It's definitely a lot like that.
At least in football, you've got downs where you can reorganize each time.
Yeah.
You know, in soccer, it's like the ball's a magnet and all the little ones just run the ball like, no, hold your position.
What position? The ball's over there.
Right.
We definitely have more. We have more opportunity for teaching, for sure, in between each down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, no, the ball went the opposite way. You need to run over there. Oh, my safeties and linebackers the other night were just running the polar opposite way of the ball. It was amazing, but yeah. So,
all right. Well, hey, I have a comment from YouTube, and I'm springing this on you guys. I don't really know about this. I'm going to have to look it up unless you guys just know. It does bring up a topic that does keep coming up, though. This is, we'll say, from Craig on YouTube 8 days ago. I've been listening for a long time. Glad to have you all back together again. Did you have past episodes where you covered these two peptides, AOD 9604 and sermorelin, 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 acetate? They intrigue me, but I'm hesitant to do anything as I think most of this stuff is just created to make the healthcare people rich. I don't know about these peptides. I have covered a couple peptides on the Nutrition Radio podcast. We touched on them a couple times here. Mike, I know that you talk to people who are into peptides and stuff like that. Are you familiar with these two?
I mean, vaguely, not enough to, I would say, add anything useful. The only things I would add is, for peptide stuff, I have a guy that I refer clients to privately. He's super up to date on it. That's a lot of what he does, sourcing, all that kind of stuff. Plus, peptides are in this weird gray area where you can definitely find some research on it, but because they're generally not patentable and they're sort of becoming a little more popular now, there's just not, I would say, a ton of research on it, especially in humans. Like if you look at BPC 157, a lot of people swear by it for injury healing. Last time I looked, which granted was 8 months ago, most of the data was on animals. However, I have had clients use it, and I'd say 70-80% of the time they notice a benefit. Mm-hmm. The other part, if people want more information, I did a podcast with Dr. Ryan Green and Andy Galpin. They can find on my podcast. And then I did another one with Coach Cav, Justin Kavanaugh, who's used him in other pretty, we'll say, esoteric case studies that I won't mention here.
Oh, boy.
He had a pro guy that had an MRI, showed a defect in their hamstring. He did a whole bunch of stuff with a bunch of other physicians, like I think over 2 or 3 weeks. Had him re-MRI'd again, and the hamstring was fine. And all the doctors are like, "What did you do? This is not possible." It's like some crazy stuff. So I think they can be useful, but my only other words of wisdom would be this has been published, a lot of the peptides on the market are probably not real peptides.
Bunk.
So be very careful with sourcing, especially if you're doing anything with an injection, because obviously you're risk of you'd hope that it's just sterile water, but if it's not sterile, you're going to run into all sorts of issues on top of it.
Yeah, that's the issue. That's the big issue, I think.
It is. You know what? And I think you run into the same thing with like gray and black market anabolics.
Totally.
Over the years, like, is this real? Is this not? Most guys are like, rule of thumb, if half of it's real, I win. Because but a lot of it is, if it's oil, that's a little different than water. not that that's safe to just breach your skin barrier as well with intramuscular injections and stuff. But I'm intrigued also, Craig, with these peptides. The literature, some of it is there. I agree with Mike 100%. Like, you can find it. Sometimes it's not really on Medline. It's in some quasi-obscure journal or whatever. It's probably going to work. They're taking portions of like the growth hormone, structure, for example, and just teasing out the lipolytic parts of it, the fat burning effects, and not the growth enhancing effects. Some of that stuff is really interesting to me as well. Even worse than the gray area we had with like, SARMs and pro hormone back in the day, because you're just self-experimenting is what it comes down to. And that sounds edgy until you get real sick and you end up with like immune complexes ruining your kidneys and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
in the groups that I run in, like, I haven't heard of these. So that's not a good sign for me.
Okay. Well,
you know what I'm saying? No, and that's just me being honest. Like BPC 157, I know a lot of people using that and swear by it. But generally, and that's just me being honest, it's the groups that I run in. I mean, let's be honest with, like, everybody knows that, like, all the big powerlifters and stuff, they're pretty open about usage of as much stuff as they can get a hold of.
All kinds of stuff.
And, if I ain't hearing about it, that ain't a good sign for it. So, because they'll fucking take anything. So, but
right.
That said, not many of the people I'm running around with are looking to get lean. So,
true.
I'm not in the bodybuilding crowd. So,
yeah.
But
I know of two people who, let's say, used a lot of PEDs. Obviously, I won't name them. Yeah. And then used a fair amount of peptides and went back and forth a couple times. And again, N of 2, right? Anecdotal, who knows where they got it, all the standard caveats apply. Both of them are like, yeah, peptides don't do shit compared to gear.
Yep. Well, and that's the big thing coming out now with all the peptides and the SARMs and stuff. They're like, why the fuck are you guys doing that? Like, we have all this proven stuff that actually works, and it has years of data. And not only good data, it has the bad data too. We know the side effects. Like trembling,
right? Liver,
we know the side effects.
Right. So, trend kidney stuff. Yeah, all that stuff.
And we know it all at least, and that's not a bad thing. It's good to know it. A lot of these SARMs and stuff, we just don't fucking know.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous.
This is like an adult version of The More You Know. Those old education things. Yeah, semi-illegal compounds.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. At least it's good to know the bad things. At least you know you're in it. You're educated enough to know and make that choice.
You guys, Mike mentioned like a healing and doctors saying, what's up with that? Back in the day, you would see that all the time. They would do stuff like shatter a bone, tear tendons. 6 weeks later, no evidence that it ever happened. You know? Yeah. And the doctors are like, so what's up with that? Good training, proper nutrition. And it's like, okay. I have one piece here, just came out from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, which is really a premier journal, by Learman and colleague. It's sort of doing something that I've fussed about over the years. It's referring to the paleo diet, the real paleo diet, not what social media and the internet has you believing. And I thought this would be interesting because Phil's Gentleman's Farm and how he grows a lot of his food and how, Mike's interested in about flexibility. It all ties in. So brand new paper, though, it says, although human diets varied considerably before the spread of agriculture, public perceptions of pre-ag diets have been strongly influenced by the paleo diet, which prescribes percentage calorie ranges for macros, right? 19 to 35% protein, 22 to 40% carb, and 28 to 47% fat. It also prohibits foods with added sugar, dairy, grains, most starchy tubers, and legumes. However, the empirical basis for Paleolithic nutrition remains unclear, with some of its assumptions challenged by the archaeological record and theoretical first principles. And this is what I've said all along. The study of pre-agriculture diets is real. You'll see it in anthropology and nutrition science. It's not what most people think. And that's kind of what this paper is saying. Conclusion, and I'll pull a couple of quotes from the paper, but the abstract says it's really hard to nail down macro ranges when you actually look at the way people lived. So a couple of things here. unprocessed diet that was by calorie about 35% protein, 20% fat, and a low relative abundance of saturated fats, and 45% carbohydrates derived mostly from non-starchy fruits, and also getting high levels of fiber and micronutrients, right? Vitamins, minerals. Eaton and Connor proposed that humans are poorly adapted to modern processed diets, high in simple carbs, fat, and salt, and low in fiber and micros, such as calcium, leading to an increased prevalence of the diseases of civilization, such as atherosclerosis, type 2 diabetes, and cancer. Now, a couple of other things in here. Multiple concerns suggest that the paleo diet represents neither the diversity nor the composition of human diets before agriculture. Archaeological evidence establishes that cereals, starchy tubers, and legumes were consumed in the Paleolithic period. Also, domestication transformed human diets about 600 generations ago by introducing large quantities of grains and dairy. So subsequently, natural selection did act on novel mutations and standing genetic variations to allow people to adapt. So again, they're arguing that we've had time to adapt to at least some of these things. Wrapping this up, and then I'll get your guys' input here. Studies of hunter-gatherer diets reinforce the evidence regarding what humans are poorly adapted to eat. Just what did people eat, I think, is the concern. Substantial variation among hunter-gatherer diets indicates that humans are adapted to and do adapt to many foods. And then it says, this is interesting, other aspects of hunter-gatherer diets considered include the viruses, bacteria, and parasites that were part of their consumption. You know, like people were being exposed to these things and they're not anymore. So I guess I can ask you guys what you think about that. Like, have you tried paleo diets, Phil? Like, how do you look at this, especially when it comes to stuff like not eating starchy tubers and stuff like that, or legumes, or
that was my problem with the paleo diets from the start, was the lack of, like, especially when they accepted the sweet potato but not the white potato. And it was like, come on, man, you can't tell me that caveman, like, if he found, I can't have that, it's white. No, they're going to fucking eat whatever they find. They're going to eat it. They're going to eat whatever the hell. And if they find, if I was a caveman out in the field and all of a sudden I found a whole field of potatoes, I'm not going to eat one because that's all I get because of my macros. Like, they're going to dig up that whole fucking field and eat them all. It's just what it is. The same thing. They found a fruit tree. They're going to, at that point in time, they're going to gorge themselves on as much as they can get.
Right. Screw macro ranges.
Yeah, they weren't worried about macro. Yeah, they did not give a shit. And now I think the broad concept of it is a good idea, just eating whole foods, which is what we preach anyway. Yeah, and it's just, eat a bunch of one ingredient foods. But they were going to, like, if they found a whole field of berries, they're going to pick every goddamn berry and save them. Or if they found a field of potatoes, I don't think it probably took long for these people to realize, look, we can store these things in a cool, dark place, and they can last a long time.
So we don't starve later.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to figure that out quickly. My only issue with it, I think the broad concept of it, I think it's just been bastardized for marketing, and because people in today's society, what would you call them? Internet nutritionists love to label things evil, even good things like white potatoes. And it's just annoying. It's like,
it's just to get attention, right?
Yeah. Like, I went on a tirade once on the internet because of the paleo thing. And if you look up the white potato versus the sweet potato, like, there's benefits to the white potato over it, where I can make an argument where it's better.
Yep.
It's interesting. Yeah. What about you, Mike? Flexibility. I mean, they said even things like dairy and grains, they were introduced so many generations ago. There's been time for natural selection to act, and people are essentially, they're saying, very flexible, and we can evolve to handle this stuff. I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, every time they keep, I lost track of what the last time was, but they keep finding earlier and earlier evidence of dairy and especially grains, depending on the culture, where you're at, obviously climate, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, similar to Phil. I mean, if the average person eating a Western diet said, hey, I'm going to eat a paleo diet. Cool. That's quite a bit better.
Right.
But then you get down the path of like, well, which paleo diet? There's how many different versions now, and the arguing about the sweet potatoes, and now with what I've noticed with technology like continuous glucose monitors, which I think are good. I think they're useful. But again, are you using it to become neurotic about stuff, or are you using it to see what you can actually handle?
Yeah.
I've heard podcasts with one person who said that she had a reaction to grapes. And so then all of a sudden you hear all these people saying, oh, so-and-so said grapes are bad.
Yeah.
It's like, well, wait a minute. Like, that was an individual N of one study she was talking about. Now everybody thinks because one person on the internet had a reaction that these certain foods are now bad. So that's part that drives me nuts. And related to metabolic flexibility, the wider variety of things you can handle without having issues, the better and more adaptable you're going to be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. To your point, in August's IFT magazine, social media leaves consumers confused. It's literally talking about nutrition and how people like, wait, I thought that was good. It's like, no, that was some bozo looking for attention by saying blueberries are bad. Why you shouldn't eat these 5 things or whatever. Yeah. Right. And that's the problem. But to the point of like the common sense, like where in nature, I used to say this in class all the time, where in nature do you see like 100+ grams of high fructose corn syrup? You don't,
Yeah.
And so it's bizarre that the human body can even handle that. I've often said that. To Mike's point, I'm sure you could probably become more flexible and be able to handle a carbohydrate onslaught. But yeah, I mean, unless you dive into a beehive, which has its own risks.
Yes,
And you eat gobs and gobs of honey, it's like actually hard to even get gigantic amounts of fructose and that kind of stuff just in a hunter-gatherer environment. So, and when you can drink it down in a 16-ounce cola literally within seconds, in less than a minute if you wanted to, like I'm amazed the human body can even do that. Yeah, and the original concepts about, like no grains, no beans. Well, we're back to what kind of grains are we talking about here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and paleo diet, like what area?
Yes.
The Catawbans who ate mostly, carbohydrates, to the Eskimos who didn't eat hardly any carbohydrates. And it wasn't because Eskimos hate carbohydrates. There isn't any there.
Yeah, they didn't have access. And that is
right.
Big one that people forget.
Well, I think that's what partly this paper is pointing at, this Lieberman paper, is, wow, we got to really be careful just trying to, because in order to sell something, you almost need to define these narrow ranges and say, this is what I own. This is kind of my patentable little angle on this. But when you look at it, there was a lot of variation. And, sort of to your point, Mike, and, that's, people are flexible. Human beings can live on almost nothing but fatty fish, like, Inuit Eskimo populations, and that other ones, when there's a lot of fruit around, they're going to do just fine. With a relative abundance of carbohydrates or fruits.
That's one thing that's interesting to me that you've brought up numerous times, and you've stated that you think it's like the next thing coming up is like, what is your genetic background? What were your ancestors? Yeah. Like if you come from a predominantly Asian background, like your culture has eaten tons of rice for thousands of years. Whereas if you came from northern background, where it was like
you can handle stuff like milk, right? Like milk is a good example of that.
And just thinking logic, like I have no scientific background of this, but it just makes sense in my mind. Like your ancestors and your genetic code now, one would think, is predisposed to eating that kind of food. It would make sense. Right. Now, we need to have the science to back it up over time, but I think that would be a good way to lean on.
Your great-great-grandparents were selected, right? The ones that thrived the most and had the most offspring.
Yeah, that's like
I actually digest lactose or something like that.
Yeah, and I know just from trial and error in my own diets, like I handle a low carbohydrate diet very well. I feel better, my energy evens out, and I lose fat. But I know other people that do horrible on it. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that's not me. Well, just fucking keep trying, dummy. No, if they feel like shit and they perform like hell, why am I going to have them do that? Let's find what works for the individual. Now, I can tell you that most individuals, I would argue every individual, isn't going to do well on just highly processed bullshit.
Yeah.
That's where, that's where we end. And that's why I think it's always good for us to at least point out, like, eat like an adult most times. Just eat whole foods. And then from there, you can narrow it down and figure out what you perform best on. So.
And on the genetic side, there's some of the older Pima Indian studies where they looked at them, and when they got, more access to Western foods, which generally are not real high quality, but, certain subsets had much, much harder time with the sort of rapid change. Eskimos are another population. The influx of huge amount of carbohydrates hasn't gone well, but they also have very unique adaptations to very high-fat diets, too.
Yes.
So, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Yep. And, that's just one thing we need to look at. But
I think I've seen that with Australian Aboriginal populations, too, right? Like they suddenly get introduced to Western diets and not cool. So,
sure.
and, you do have to be careful. I'm not saying anything should move toward like this sort of dystopian future, where you're trying to single out people for their genes or whatever. But I'd much rather have someone say, Lonnie, you have the genes to respond to X, Y, and Z, instead of trying to make these broad diet recommendations that apply more to some people than to others. I know that that's hard for government authorities to do that kind of stuff. And, now they're talking about dietary patterns a little bit more. They're trying to be a little bit more broad brush in some ways. But, yeah.
Well, and then we can't ignore the fact that me coming from an athletic background and mostly coaching people that are looking to live in the extremes, we can't ignore the fact that many times what we need to eat has nothing to do with health. Like when we're talking 100% pure performance.
Oh, yeah.
You got to throw that shit out the window. And people are uncomfortable with that. With elite athletes.
Calorie intakes alone. Right?
Yes. Most of the time, that's what we're looking at. It's like
grotesque.
Like my kid has to go out today, and we were talking about it before the show. He has to at least run 100 plays running both ways on the field. I'm not feeding him, a chicken breast and some broccoli before he goes out there. That ain't going to happen.
Nope.
I need to fuel that little guy. And to make it through 2 hours of just crushing people on both sides of the ball. So,
that's something that Fortress used to say all the time. He's like, how much brown rice and broccoli am I going to have to eat to get to like 5,000 calories today?
Yes.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. Yeah. And there was another thing on that the other day. It was one of the NFL players was talking about. It's like, I had to stop by Taco Bell and shit like that 4 times a day. I had to have the calories. And like, I'm sorry, I can't cook that much. I have other things I have to do. I need to put in 8 hours of training. I don't have the time for that shit. I just need calories because I'm going to go out there and make $26 million doing this job. So, there's a different time and a place. And what applies to elite athletes or people that want to be elite athletes is different than that applies to an average person that's looking for longevity and health.
Right. Yeah.
So
I guess the overall position then, if I'm summing up what all of us are saying here before we go to break, you can be informed by the idea that people evolved to eat certain things, right? And when you introduce these really bizarre things like a bucket of high fructose corn syrup pop or whatever it might be, like that is very weird, probably didn't really evolve to do that. That's abusive. But population specificity matters. You can't pretend a paleo diet is just one thing. I think my main thing is, because I'm just sort of anti-guru, is that a lot of people on the internet, they just want to say stupid, politicians as well, but even these nutrition gurus, they'll say something as stupid as possible because it means clicks and hits, and that's all that matters. That's all that matters. You can be informed by a paleo diet, but don't pretend it was just one thing and that it has real strict macro regimes.
Yes. Yeah.
And the last thing I would add is looking at background or even genetics, we so little about it that I think gives you an okay place to start testing. Right? It's like you said, if you're of a certain background that hasn't been exposed to it, maybe we'll pull that out for a while and see how you look, perform, and feel. And if you can't notice any different on an individual level, then you're probably okay, but it just gives you a little bit better direction to start your testing in, so you know where to go.
Mike, can I just ask you, because I know we've talked about this with training programs as well. We're not suggesting you try something for a week at a time and give it up. Right? There's a period of adaptation here. When I think about like gut microbiota, usually those painful changes take several weeks. What would you suggest if you're going to try a new diet before you give up on it?
If people are willing to, we'll just change one component at a time. Right, so I've had some people who say, I think I have an issue with dairy, but I'd like to consume dairy at some point. Cool. We'll pull all dairy out for probably 2 to 8 weeks, maybe longer, and see how they feel. If they're like, wow, I feel amazing, cool. But they're like, man, I'd really love to have dairy. Okay. So let's slowly add it back in, and then you're going to probably start with, things that don't have a lot of lactose. So whey protein isolate, not a concentrate, small amounts of yogurt. You're going to have some intelligent adding of things back, and then you're going to expand from there. If they can tolerate that, okay, then maybe we'll try different types of caseinate program or proteins and other things. So I like doing it that way because I've had several people who can't handle dairy in general, but high-fat things like butter, ghee are fine, and even things that are low in lactose are fine. So it's probably more the lactose than it is necessarily the dairy. But again, that takes, a while, and it takes them to be relatively strict and feedback and that type of thing too. But like you said, it's a multi-week, multi-month or longer process to do that.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's go to break. When we come back, Phil's got some story from this past week about core training, about real core training versus what other people think, whatever. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody, Iron Radio is back, and in an expanded way. What can you expect? Well, first, you can get it simulcast every week on the nutritionradio.org network, as well as on the original podcast. It'll appear regularly on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite podcasting sites. We have a new Iron Radio /Nutrition Radio Facebook page as well. Please check us out. We're even backed up on YouTube. Second, please tell your friends who are longtime loyal listeners that they may see emails that share just the episode link and the show notes. This is a new thing, and we hope it will build community. Third, if you were a supporting member in the past, we may prompt you to resume through PayPal, but we will confirm each and every donor before reinstating that membership category. We'll never just restart your $4 auto payments without agreement from you. And of course, we will accept new members moving forward as well. Starting back slowly and honorably is the goal. And lastly, expect the sister show Nutrition Radio to expand into once weekly 45 to 60 minute episodes with guest co-hosts covering the same nerdy nutrition news that's been broadcast for a few months now in daily 10-minute clips. We hope that an expanded presence will get you the news, education, banter, and guests that's made Iron Radio's community so loyal from the start. You are appreciated.
Okay, guys, we are back. We're going to talk a bit of core training. So I was actually at a family function a couple days ago, and there was some people there that my uncle was talking, and they realized that me and my wife were deeply entrenched into fitness and strength training. And all of a sudden, she's like, "Oh, you guys are into strength training?" I was like, "Yeah." Well, what you need to do to get your core up, she ended up trying to talk me into that I need to become a pole dancer. Me and my wife, we need to convert our gym to a pole dancing gym so we can raise the population's core strength up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then she proceeded to show me a video of some 74-year-old lady that decided to take up pole dancing, and now she's like a freak. And her core is much stronger than mine. And I was very polite about things. I was like, "Oh, that's neat." I was like, "You should try that. Why don't you do pole dancing then?" Because you're like a 63-year-old lady that evidently wants your core to get stronger. So go ahead and do that. And I got into no arguments with her, but like, it's not worth it. But, I just told her, I squat 770, so I'm pretty sure my core is pretty strong. Now, can I get up and spin around on a pole? No, but that's also probably because I'm a large mammal and I'd really want a strong pole.
Yeah.
and my shoulder strengths just aren't going to do that.
Titanium.
Yeah. So, And I could have tried to get into a deep argument about this stuff and just go into the biomechanics of it and things like that. But it's just an interesting thing. And then, it made me reflect on my own things with other people. Like my father, he's 73 this year, and he's always been active. His activity was more based on his background in the military. So it was lots of push-ups, sit-ups, things like that. Like all my life as a kid, I remember my dad waking up every morning. He'd wake up, do 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups. And whatever, it kept him in great shape.
Yeah.
Oh, and now he goes to the gym and hits his leg press and things like that. And he was telling me how, I moved up to 300 pounds on leg press. And then he was asking me, he had been doing 200 pounds for like 5 years. And he's like, should I up the load periodically? Because I just moved up to 300 and I can do it easy. I was like, well, yeah, that's the point, progressive load, things like that. But he decided to join me and my training partner for squats. And he was a little taken back that like a 95-pound squat for him was really hard when he's doing sets of 20 on leg press with 200 pounds. And it was all that other structural strength that was given out, like his back, his things like that, were what just wasn't holding up. And that's where the issue comes in with non-compound movements. You're just not using your body as a single unified organism to move things against gravity. So, and I just thought that'd be an interesting topic to come up, talk about and flesh out with, core training versus, like targeted core training versus just, core training that happens as the byproduct of the move, and your body working in unison. No, I mean, I can take that, like in my early training days, I did a ton of core work, but that was also because I knew that was my weakness. What gave on me was I'd fold. My upper body would fold under heavy loads, whereas my legs could handle that. And I think that's a very usual thing. I see that a lot in beginning lifters. Like what gives out on them is their core. They're getting folded in their upper back, mid back, things like that. But you usually see it in advanced lifters. They've attacked that enough, and it came to a point, and that's just like I've talked about on the show numerous times. There was a point in time where I good morninged 675 with a safety squat bar, and that's the day that I quit doing good mornings. Because at that time I was squatting 500, and I was like, why the fuck am I doing good mornings when I'm good morning 175 pounds more than I can squat?
Yeah, we're done here.
Yeah. I'm wasting my time. And that's the same thing I ended up doing with core training. It's like, when I failed a squat, it was my hip strength. It's not my core. So, and that's one thing, you as a coach or you as a lifter yourself, you need to identify this stuff. And like if your core is a weakness, yes, do extra core work, but aside from the compound moves you're doing. But it's just an interesting topic, and I think the general population abs are popular. Abs is, I mean, you could argue like abs and biceps, baby. That's where it's at. Mm-hmm. Abs, biceps, and pecs is where everybody looks. So of course there's tons of stuff promoted towards that, but it's how we get to that is what's more important in my opinion. So I don't know. What do you guys think on the subject?
What do you think, Mike? You're always, in my mind, you're very explorational. Like you do, you'll do all kinds of cool stuff outside of the box.
Weird.
But I get it. But I'll withhold what I'm going to say because mine's very basic on how I always dealt with core.
I always think it's, again, it goes back to specificity. What are you trying to do? Mm-hmm. Right. So like Phil said, if you're just doing sagittal, bilaterally loaded squat bench, those type of things, then I think just that axial support's probably pretty good. For athletes, you're going to be looking at rotational power transfer from upper body to lower body. Sprinting, if you can get someone to sprint safely, don't Kevin Hart yourself and destroy yourself. You can sprint safely at 80-90% or even lower than that, and you can get someone who knows what they're doing watch you. That is like, I got this from Cal Dietz. That's probably the best overall diagnostic. And you'll see some athletes, in my opinion, with a little bit of a weaker core where they there's a lot of movement between their upper body and their lower body that shouldn't necessarily be going on. That's a whole separate argument about how do you train that, because that's a reflexive core action per se. For most, I'd say general population, people who are doing weightlifting stuff, after that, I actually like doing more, I hate to use the word, three-dimensional core training. A lot of weird off-axis stuff, just because I think it's going to transfer more to their life and whatever else they're doing. If they can do them safely, bend press, kettlebell windmill, even a semi-moderately heavy one-handed farmer's walk. Caveat with that, if you have farmer's bars, it's going to be better than a kettlebell. At some point, the kettlebell is just going to beat the shit out of your leg from hitting it. Those are kind of the things that I would look at, even off-axis lifts, Jefferson lift, stuff that just kind of puts your body in a different position. And then obviously start, super light with that because you're not used to it. Last thing I would add is even taking some standard lifts and doing them just by shifting the load. So I'm a huge fan of like the Zercher squat, because you've got a load you're holding in the crooks of your elbows in front of you. And even the double kettlebell front squat, which you've got two bells in front of you. So now the load is even further out than if you're using a straight bar for a front squat. And I just started doing those again now. And I think I kind of underappreciated how much sort of core activation there is just to hold you in that position. And most people can get into that position better than they can on a front squat. And it's just the amount of core activation is more because the load's more shifted out in front of you at the same time.
No, and that's interesting you say that, because like with my powerlifters and things, my strength athletes that are very much simple bilateral movements, like most of the core work I have them do is not like a leg raise or a sit-up or it's things we don't get in our own training. It's heavy suitcase carries, heavy side bends, heavy, things where we're twisting. Like we don't get that in training, so we need to attack that stuff a bit. And then you get into my throwers and things like that, and then it's a lot of that. Like
that's a lot.
We don't need core stability, which is mostly what powerlifters need. And if early on my athletes in powerlifting, it's very much static ab work. It's like it's making them realize the job of your abdominal wall is not to create movement and do like a crunch. It's to resist any movement. Like we don't want it to fucking move at all. And you just need to be able to hold position. So that's where we get into heavy planks and things like that. It's just like, stay there. Don't allow your core to move. Like that is 100% your job in a squat. Like if you're squatting 800 pounds, don't fucking move. So, and that's a skill in and of itself to just wrench down. But I can tell you when I moved to throwing, it hurt my throwing.
Oh, it'll destroy
it made my throwing horrible because I needed my core to move. Yep. So my core needed to be strong in movement patterns. So, and that's still what kills me in Highland Games, because when I go hard, I wrench down and I lock my body up. So whenever I try hard in throwing, I throw worse because I default to powerlifting.
Lock it down.
Yes, I lock everything down. So.
Yeah. Maybe for me, because my late teens, early 20s was Taekwondo, which was a lot of twisting. Think about like a roundhouse kick kind of or a hook kick or anything like that. Lots of that kind of rotational. But I mean, all throughout my bodybuilding career, maybe because bodybuilders usually do abs at the end of a workout, but I relied on squats. I just figured, I've got this, I'm shaped like a T. I've got hundreds of pounds on my back, so I'm not pitching forward, back, right, or left. I'm not twisting. I'm sort of your point, Phil, kind of locking that down. Yeah. And then I would end up doing like incline sit-ups or V-sits. I mean, V-sits, if you've done those properly, there's quite a bit of coordination and stabilization going on with that kind of stuff. Yeah. Sometimes I would do like lying trunk twist where you just swing your leg up, kind of thing. Like I saw athletes do a lot in collegiate football settings and stuff. But that was it. Like I thought, I'm doing low rack pulls. I'm squatting. I'm doing overhead military presses in the middle of the gym. I feel good. Like I'm pretty good. Now, having said that, before we hit the record button, everybody, when I would do high rep squats, you do like sets of 20 with a reasonable amount of weight, my lower back would probably go first. That's the price. But yeah, that's as complicated as mine ever got.
Yeah, and I'm a broken record here, but then we also have to look at what are you trying to do? Like when I took up boxing, I go in there and those guys end the fucking training session with, like you said, okay, we're going to do 500 V sets. And like you give me a load, put 50 pounds on my legs and in my arms, I'll do a V set. But when I needed to do 500, I was toast. I was toast.
Right. Specificity.
Because everything lit on fire. All that lactic acid, because my body's just not used to that. But I could do a heavy load unlike them. I was really good at intensity, not very good at endurance. But that built up fast. I was able to complete things really quick after a month. And it's just from the specificity of training. And that's where we need to look at. Like if you're a powerlifter, okay, how much twisting motion do we need? Yeah, it's probably good to give them some. But we're not going to devote a lot of time to that because it's not directly relating to their sport. If you're looking to be the best in it, we have only got a limited amount of time every day. So we need to target that towards what we need. But I don't know. I'm just old school. I'm an old school barbell coach, and I wish everybody in the world would just like if all of a sudden we woke up and the whole population just went in 3 days a week, squatted, pressed, and did chin-ups, the whole fucking world would be in a lot better place.
Yeah.
The whole world. Like, give me a half an hour a day, do 3 sets of 10 on those 3 moves, 3 days a week. The whole world would be a better place, physically.
Yeah.
And
I'd have to add deadlifts in, but I agree.
Oh, yeah, that too. But I mean, like, honestly, it's not that hard, and people make it so hard. Like, that's the thing I see with new people is they'll go in and they'll go to 30 machines and give 2 sets, and it's like, guys, if you just simplify your training and do dumb stuff, like you're not an athlete.
Man, I'm living it. I'm living that right now. Machines, ridiculous machines with a very limited range of motion or plane of direction. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I just long for the days. I just want to do, like, for my back, I'd like to just do some barbell bent rows in the middle of the gym. That's it. Not half a dozen weird machines.
That's what I've had the argument with numerous people. Is like, I need to do these 7 different moves for my legs. And I'd argue with them. I was like, okay, well, how about you just try this? Go into the gym and squat for 45 minutes. Tomorrow, call me and tell me what part of your legs you missed. Yep. If you have it, your ass, your hamstrings, your quads, your calves are going to fucking hurt.
I know, right? Yep.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you missed nothing. And that's, people just don't realize how simple training can be to be just in decent shape. You can be in decent shape with really simple training. Now, is it going to get boring over time? Sure. But that's where you're like, okay, I'm going to deadlift this time. Like, it's not that hard to be in decent shape.
Yeah, and your variety can be switching from a back squat to a front squat to a safety bar.
Right, yeah.
That's like me, and I'm essentially retired from lifting sports. Every once in a while I'll go, I'll probably do a powerlifting meet in the next few years or whatever, but I'm not training at that high level anymore. I'm not signing up for a meet every 4 months and Lonnie making fun of me because I compete so much. I just go train.
No, Mike and I were always impressed that you competed so much.
I know. But I go in and I train, and I train simply. Like yesterday we squatted, did some drop sets. I did 25 at 225 just because I need to do some, because we quit doing reps for so long. So anyway, I squatted 550, and then I did 25 at 225. Then we did some deadlifts, and then we went and threw. I missed nothing, and I had fun. We keep it simple, and just like I don't do what I did before. I don't have those marathon sessions where I'm murdering myself. But man, I'm staying in decent shape as a middle-aged man, and I'm good with it. So,
Yeah, and I think that's a lost art. I posted something the other day about I did a axle deadlift for an hour and 20 minutes, and I got a volume PR, and I was happy.
Yeah, there you go.
You did what? And that's the 3rd time you've done that lift this week? I'm like, yeah, because it kept going well. So why would I?
Yeah.
I'm going to go until it, last week it kind of went off the cliff. But, it was expected. I hit a PR. Yep. I was happy. I was like, hey, cool. Because I've been doing that lift for going on probably almost 12 years now.
Yeah.
So and it's a goal, so I need a little bit more exposure to it. I can't get by with like 3 sets of 10.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, you can
But
add
people
some
forget that
variety.
part. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we could really, to your point, I think, Phil, partly, is those old bodybuilding posters where they show just like a dozen exercises with a barbell. I love that stuff. That stuff worked. I mean, that way worked. Because, to your point about squats, I'll go squat after messing around with leg press or something else, and I'm wrecked from my hips to my ankle.
Yes.
So I'm like, wow, efficient. Especially as you get older. Because I'm not trying to do that I'm not trying to use, for me, I don't squat 405 and stuff like I used to. I don't. When that started hurting, I started thinking, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, I'm in my late 40s. I don't really want to compete in my 50s. Some people do. That's fine. But what am I doing? I love those old posters. Or I used to have an old nutrition chart on the fridge, too. It just had, like, the macros and all, major categories of foods. You could learn a lot just having a chart for your macro, like foods, protein, carbon, fat, and foods, and then a poster like you used to hang up in the gym back in the day. Or it would come in the box of your cement and plastic weights, know. Instead, what you see now, like I'll look at some of these science journals, and they're doing such extremely niche, almost bizarre, like EMG activation of your serratus during curling, and you're like, I guess. I mean, okay.
Yeah, my other argument I've always had against that, like if I hand a kid an exercise program with 14 moves on it, or I hand him an exercise program with 2, generally what you see, the people doing those 14 list programs, they're half-assing 14 things.
Yeah.
Whereas if I would rather see you go all in on 1 or 2 things and push it hard than half-ass 14 things. Like they're always holding back energy because, I've done 3 moves, but I've got 11 more to go. I can't push this because I'll never complete my list. Man, just give me one thing hard. You go in and just squat hard.
Yeah,
and if it's only a half an hour, if it's a half an hour and you're wasted, that's fine. You're done. You missed nothing, and you just did more than half-assing 14 things.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's always been my argument for just simple training. And then, of course, as we get more advanced, like Mike said, they need more. But when you're beginning, you don't need much at all.
No.
Like you earn the right to more work. So you earn that right, and you have to have it to progress at a certain point.
Yeah.
But if you're just an average, out-of-shape American, like we just talked about, pick 3 moves, go do it. 3 big compound moves, and you just hit everything. Some kind of press, some kind of leg move, some kind of pulling movement, chins, rows, whatever.
There are variations. I once had a martial arts instructor say, Lonnie, I don't know how you guys, it's so boring. Like, it's like running is boring. That's one thing. Talk about repetition. I know you can dissociate because it's such like automated motor skill kind of thing. But to your guys' point, you could do 100 different types of squats why go on about it? There's 100 different nuances to every exercise. As long as you stick to a core, like if the meat and potatoes of what you're doing are these compound multi-joint movements, like squat, bench, deadlifter, it's a pretty good start. I mean,
it really is. And people just don't get it, but they want to complicate everything. It's the same thing with nutrition. Like we just talked about at the beginning of the show. They want to complicate paleo diets and like put definitions on it. And we don't need to. Just like the plan's out there if you're smart enough to simplify it. Most complex things can be pretty simple. So,
when you prioritize,
So I would say even for the intermediate to, probably relatively advanced, people I work with, even if their goal is mainly hypertrophy, and even for people who are newer, who want to compete in some, physique aspect of it, like if Wednesday is their upper body day, that's going to start with probably a bench press and a row of some kind, like kind of almost the power bodybuilding approach. And it's probably going to be 5 to 8 reps. And obviously they don't need to do singles unless they're really trained and skilled in that. But it's going to be on the lower end of the spectrum. And I'm only looking at performance on that. Like you shouldn't be anywhere close to failure. You're probably 2, 3 RIR. And we want to see that progress over time. After that, if your third exercise is a pec deck and you do a little bit worse, I don't care if that main indicator exercise is going up, the rest of your volume is going up over time, then, shocker, you're going to get bigger too.
Yeah. And to Phil's point about if you have 14 movements, like these young bodybuilders, stop doing working on your rear delts. Dude, you don't have enough delts, period. Go stand in the middle of the gym and push a barbell up and down until you get big delts.
Yeah, it's like Windler's thing. Like, you don't have a weak point, you're just weak.
Yeah.
Quit working points when you're just weak. No, and that's also this same line of thinking has adjusted how I coach people over time, because like Mike said, if you start them off with those big compound movements, that fourth or fifth move where we're actually just targeting something, if you push those compound moves, how do I know I can't put down a load there? So, and that's something I stole from Windler. It was like, just give me 75 rows. Well, how much weight? I don't fucking care. How wore out are you? If you're still fresh, push the weight a little bit. If you're wore the hell out, just give me 50 pounds. I don't care. Just give me 75 of something. It depends on how you feel. If you really kicked your ass in that first part of training, it might be light. I don't care. So it just depends on how you feel after that first more important part of the training. Like, those first few moves are your steak and it's the main course of your meal. The rest of the stuff is the fluff. It's it's your dessert. So,
because as we've talked about here before too, like most of the professionals or people I see promoting, start with flies or light exercise for chest is, like the video we talked about of Jay Cutler talking about what he does for chest, and then 8 minutes into the video, he's like, well, in high school, I was doing 405 for sets of, 8 to 12 reps easy. I'm like, oh, okay. That makes sense to you then.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So
Billy just got crushed by the bar. He probably doesn't need to start with dumbbell flies.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, guys.
All right.
Till next week, I'm going to go food some cats.
Oh,
right. With helmets.
Yep. So, all right. Catch you later.
See ya.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on IronRadio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.